My dog eats better than your kids. Those words echoed through the courtroom. At first, some people laughed, a short, awkward laugh, the kind people make when they don't yet understand what they're hearing. Then the room went quiet, because those words weren't a joke. They weren't sarcasm, they were a window into a mindset. Good morning. Please be seated. Before I tell you who stands before this court today, before I explain what brought us here, you need to understand something about this courtroom, about this bench, about justice itself. I've been doing this a long time, 32 years. Since 1992, I've sat right here, looking people in the eye at the worst moments of their lives. I've seen people who made bad choices, people who broke the law, people who hurt others, and people who hurt themselves. I've seen wealth. I've seen poverty. I've seen privilege handed down like an inheritance. And I've seen people fight for every single thing they own. And in many of those cases, I showed mercy. I gave second chances, I believed apologies, I believed regret. Because justice is not just punishment. Justice is also hope. But every once in a while, a case walks through that door that forces you to stop, to pause, to ask yourself a hard question. Am I being merciful, or am I allowing arrogance to go unchecked? Because justice is not only compassion. Justice is accountability. Justice is protection. Justice is drawing a line and saying no further. And today's case is one of those cases. Let me be very clear, crystal clear. This courtroom is a place of respect. I don't care what you wear. I don't care what your last name is. I don't care how much money you have or who your parents are. Designer clothes don't buy dignity here. Power doesn't buy immunity. Everyone who walks through that door is equal under the law. That's not a slogan. That's a rule. Now let's talk about why we're here. December 4th, 2024, 10:30 in the morning, courtroom 3A. The defendant is 26 years old. Her name is Madison Elizabeth Harrington. She lives on one of the most expensive streets in the state. She attended elite schools, graduated from an elite university. She is never worried about rent, never worried about groceries, never worried about whether the lights would stay on. She is the daughter of a powerful United States senator. And let me say this once, so no one misunderstands. None of that matters. What matters is what she did. Because this case is not about a misunderstanding, it's not about a bad day. It's not about a momentary lapse in judgment. This is about a pattern of contempt, a pattern of entitlement, a pattern that tells us exactly how someone sees the rest of the world. 2 months ago, October 8th, 2024, 2:45 in the afternoon, Wayland Square, Providence, a quiet, upscale neighborhood, families shopping, elderly couples picking out dinner, people going about ordinary lives. And into that space walked Madison Harrington, holding her French bulldog. His name is Bentley. Bentley has his own social media following. Bentley wears custom outfits. Bentley eats food prepared by a private chef. Yes, a private chef. More than $20,000 a year, just to feed one dog. Now listen carefully. I love dogs. I've had dogs my whole life. But no dog, no matter how expensive, no matter how fashionable, is worth more than basic human decency. And that's where everything went wrong. The store has a simple rule: no pets, service animals only. It's posted, it's legal, it's about health and safety. So the store manager approaches her. His name is David Chen, 8 years at that store, a father of 3. An immigrant who built his life here through hard work. He doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't insult her. He simply explains the policy and politely asks her to remove the dog. That's it. A simple request, a simple rule, and that's when she looks at him, and says the words that brought us here. My dog eats better than your kids. Let that sink in. Not whispered, not said in frustration, said with confidence, with superiority, with laughter. And in that moment, this case stopped being about a dog. It became about who deserves respect, and who in her eyes does not. And what happened next was far worse. After she said it, there was a pause, not the awkward kind, the dangerous kind. David Chen didn't respond right away. He didn't argue. He didn't insult her back. He just stood there, processing what had just been said to him in front of a crowded store. A father, being told his children mattered less than a dog. People nearby stopped shopping, carts stopped rolling, phones slowly came out. And Madison noticed. You could see it in her posture, in her smile. She liked the attention. David calmly repeated the policy. He asked her again to take the dog outside. That's when her tone changed. Her voice got louder, sharper, designed to cut. She laughed and said, "Do you know who my father is?" That question has been asked in courtrooms for centuries, and it has never changed the law. But in that store, she believed it would. David said something simple, something respectful. "Ma'am, that doesn't change the policy." That was the moment she lost control. She rolled her eyes, she scoffed, she stepped closer. And then she said something worse. She pointed at him and said, "You people are always complaining." That's when the room shifted. A mother pulled her child closer. An elderly man shook his head. Someone whispered, "Did she really say that?" David asked her one final time to leave. She refused. Instead, she raised her phone and started recording. She mocked him. She smiled into the camera. She narrated the moment like it was entertainment. "Look at this," she said. "Some guy on a power trip because of a dog." Her followers were watching live, laughing, commenting, encouraging. David radioed for security. That's when she crossed another line. She stepped into his space, her finger inches from his face, and she said loud enough for everyone to hear, "I could buy your entire life with my allowance." That sentence didn't just humiliate him. It exposed her. Security arrived. 2 guards. Calm. Professional. They told her she needed to leave immediately. She refused again. Bentley barked. She laughed. Someone shouted, "Just leave already." She turned toward the crowd and said, "This is what happens when poor people get authority." That was it. Security escorted her toward the exit. She resisted, pulled back, yelled. Outside the store, the argument continued. She accused David of harassment, of discrimination, of ruining her day. Someone called the police, and when the sirens came into view, she smiled. She leaned toward her phone and said, "Watch this, they won't do anything." But this time, she was wrong. The officers listened. They reviewed the video. They spoke to witnesses. And then, they turned to her. When they told her she was being detained for disorderly conduct, her expression changed. Shock, disbelief, anger. She screamed. She demanded names. She demanded phone calls. She told them her father would hear about this. But the handcuffs clicked anyway. Cold, metal, final. The live stream cut out. And that arrest was only the beginning, because what she did next would shock the entire city. The moment the live stream ended, the internet exploded. Clips spread faster than facts, faster than explanations, faster than apologies that never came. By nightfall, millions had seen it. The words, the smirk, the entitlement. "My dog eats better than your kids." People replayed it again and again, trying to understand how someone could say that and smile. Madison Harrington was released later that evening. No bail, no apology, no remorse. She walked out of the station like someone who believed this would all disappear by morning. She was wrong. By sunrise, her name was everywhere. Former classmates spoke out. Old co-workers posted screenshots. Waitstaff shared stories. Stories about being snapped at, belittled, ignored. This wasn't new behavior. This was exposure. And instead of going quiet, Madison went online. She posted a story, laughing. She said people were too sensitive. She said the manager was playing victim. She said the arrest was cute, and then she wrote something that poured gasoline on the fire. "I still don't regret it." That sentence did more damage than any video. Sponsors dropped Bentley. Yes, the dog lost brand deals. Her university issued a statement. Careful, cold, distanced. Her father's office went silent. And still, she didn't stop. 2 weeks later, November 2nd, a high-end restaurant, downtown Providence, white tablecloths, low lighting, soft music. Madison arrived with friends, laughing, drinking, recording. The server approached. A young woman, early 20s, polite, professional. She explained there was a wait for a specific table. Madison sighed loudly, rolled her eyes, and said, "Unbelievable, even service here is declining." The server apologized. That wasn't enough. Madison stood up. She said, "Do you know how much money I spend in this city?" The server stayed calm, and then Madison did something no one expected. She threw her drink. It didn't shatter, but it soaked the server's uniform. Ice hit the floor. Liquid spread. The room froze. Someone gasped. Someone stood up. Madison laughed. Security moved in immediately. She resisted. Again. She shouted. Again. And when the police arrived, again, she said her father's name. This time the charges were more serious: assault, disorderly conduct, public intoxication. This time there were no smiles, because this time the judge would see everything, every video, every post, every pattern. And when she walked back into this courtroom, she would no longer be the one laughing. This time, when Madison Harrington walked into the courtroom, the laughter was gone. No phone in her hand, no smile on her face, just tight shoulders, clenched jaw, and eyes scanning the room, looking for something familiar, something comforting. She didn't find it. The gallery was full. Reporters, community members, people who looked like they'd waited a long time for this moment. David Chen was there. He sat quietly in the second row, hands folded, back straight. He didn't look at her. That hurt more than any glare could. The charges were read aloud: disorderly conduct, harassment, assault, public intoxication. Each word landed heavier than the last. Her attorney stood up quickly, well-dressed, well-paid. He spoke about stress, about misunderstanding, about a young woman under immense pressure. He said she was learning. He said she was growing. He said she deserved compassion. Then Madison was invited to speak. She stood. And for a moment, it looked like she might say the right thing. She took a breath. And then she said, "I think this has all been blown out of proportion." You could feel the air leave the room. She said she was being targeted, that people were jealous, that social media had turned her into a villain. She never said sorry. Not to David, not to the server, not to anyone. She sat down. That's when I spoke. I asked her one question, just one. "Ms. Harrington, do you believe rules apply to you?" She hesitated, and that hesitation said everything. I reminded her that power does not erase responsibility, that money does not purchase decency, that influence does not rewrite the law. I reminded her that respect is not optional. Then I turned to the evidence, the videos, the posts, the live stream, the pattern. Not one bad moment, not one mistake, a choice repeated. And then I did something the courtroom didn't expect. I asked David Chen to stand. I asked him how many hours he works each week, how many kids he has, what it felt like to hear his children compared to a dog. His voice didn't shake, but the room did. He said, "I didn't need an apology that day. I needed basic respect." Silence followed, heavy, unavoidable. I looked back at Madison, and that's when she finally understood. This wasn't about embarrassment. This wasn't about headlines. This was about consequences. And the decision was already taking shape. What happened next never made the news. Not right away. Because after that hearing, after the cameras shut off, after the courtroom emptied, the phone calls started. Quiet calls. Careful calls. Not to the clerk. Not to the prosecutor. To people behind the scenes. People who knew people. People who believed influence still mattered. Suggestions were made. First offense. Promising future. Unnecessary damage. Someone used the word career. Someone else used the word family. And someone, somewhere, assumed the bench would bend. It didn't. Because the law doesn't move for pressure and justice doesn't blink. The prosecution returned with more. Witness statements, employee records, prior complaints that were never filed, because people were afraid afraid of consequences, afraid of power, and now.
They weren't afraid anymore. The restaurant server testified next. She stood small behind the microphone, hands trembling. She described the cold splash, the laughter, the humiliation. She said she went home that night and cried in the shower because she didn't understand what she did wrong. That sentence stayed with everyone. Then came the videos. Not just the viral one. Others. Old clips. Deleted posts. Archived stories. Different places. Different faces. Same tone. Same superiority. Same absence of empathy. Madison watched the screen. Her jaw tightened. Her foot bounced. This time, she didn't look bored. Her attorney objected. Again and again. But patterns don't get objected away. They get proven. And then, I asked Madison to stand once more. I asked her if she wanted to say anything before sentencing. The room held its breath. This was the moment where accountability could finally appear. She swallowed. Her voice was softer now. She said she was sorry if anyone felt hurt. She said she was misunderstood. That she was stressed. That she was young. She said she didn't think things would go this far. And that was the truth. She never thought they would. She thought money would buffer her. That status would protect her. But the law doesn't recognize entitlement. I told her that words matter. That patterns matter. That character is revealed not in comfort, but in conflict. I reminded her that consequences aren't cruelty. They are correction. I looked at David Chin, at the server, at the people in the gallery, and then I delivered the sentence. A fine large enough to hurt, large enough to teach, large enough to be remembered. Mandatory community service. Not charity galas. Not photo ops. Real work. With real people. Under supervision. Anger management counseling. Mandatory. And a warning. Clear. Final. That the next time, there would be no leniency. No influence. No excuses. As the gavel came down, Madison Harrington finally cried. Not because she was embarrassed, but because for the first time in her life, power didn't save her. And that is what justice looks like. Weeks later, the cameras were gone. No headlines, no hashtags, just reality. Madison Harrington showed up for her community service in silence. No designer clothes, no phone, no audience. She worked alongside people she once dismissed. Cleaned tables, sorted food, served meals. People she never would have looked at before now stood shoulder to shoulder with her. Some recognized her. Most didn't care, because in that space, everyone was equal. David Chin returned to work. Same store, same aisle, same calm dignity. Customers stopped him sometimes. They thanked him, not because he wanted attention, but because he stood his ground without losing himself. The server from the restaurant kept her job. Stronger now, more confident. She said something later that stayed with me. I didn't need revenge. I needed to know it mattered. And it did, because justice isn't loud forever. Justice doesn't chase applause. Justice works quietly after the noise fades. As for Madison, she stopped posting. Her following disappeared. Her circles shrank. And somewhere between the work shifts, between the silence, between being treated like everyone else, something changed. Not overnight, not magically, but slowly. And that's the point. This wasn't about humiliation. It was about humility. It wasn't about punishment. It was about learning. Because dignity is not something you inherit. It's something you practice. And in this courtroom, in every courtroom, no one's dog eats better than someone else's children. That is the law. And that is justice.